modern gaming has a lot of issues, and I want to talk about them. First off, I think I should talk a bit about the microtransactions. There are millions of videos out there explaining about how bad they are, but I do think it's worth bringing up. Ubisoft's so-called time savers, for example, they know their games can feel long, tedious, and padded out, so instead of actually reducing the size and scope of it, they sell shortcuts to help players finish their game faster. It's a way to make a quick buck, and it's kind of scummy because they do know that their game design is flawed. Instead of going back and checking why the game is tedious or to fix that so it's not that tedious anymore, they just sell you these lifesavers so that you play the game less because they know most of it is fucking filler. And file sizes nowadays are fucking massive. This is mainly an issue with Western developers since they don't like to reduce file sizes for some reason, since they are probably too lazy. There are some exceptions like Doom Eternal, but most of the Western slop like Call of Duty have massive file sizes. I'm not a game dev or anything, but there are a lot bigger and better games that are not as large as these games. Elden Ring is like 50 gigabytes and is bigger and better than most of these Western games that are over 100 gigabytes. And a lot of games nowadays just rely on AI so it runs well instead of actually optimizing the game. Stuff like frame gen is just ass when you're playing action games and you need to be responsive because you're doubling the frame rate only visually. So if you're playing a game at 30 FPS and use frame gen for 60, you're still playing it at 30 FPS. It just looks 60. And for most action games, you need to be responsive, and this isn't really helping a lot. And then there's stuff like FSR and DLSS that AI upscales the game to make it run on higher resolution. And the game looks ass 9 times out of 10, making everything blurry and look like crap. There are some exceptions. I think Cyberpunk was pretty alright with it, to be honest. I didn't think that was one of the few games that actually looked fine. But the AI upscaling should mainly be a tool used to help old cards run newer titles, not a necessity for newer cards to run new titles, which I think is a major issue. And Unreal Engine 5 is not making things easier because the engine, while visually insane, has so many optimization problems. And talking about Unreal Engine 5, a lot of games that run on it feel very similar and look the same. And I heard it is because it uses the default lighting engine and they just leave it without customizing any of that stuff. Most of the developers tend not to customize that, and it just tends to look the same, which is kind of annoying. And it's also one of the reasons why I'm happy that the MGS3 remake is at least giving us an option to put on the original lighting back, because the game feels like it has a soul then, and doesn't look soulless like every other Unreal Engine game, because everything looks the fucking same. And a lot of games nowadays are just not complete when they're released, or need a million patches to run well. And it is especially annoying when you prefer to get physical games, since a lot of these games are not fully on the disc, or the super incomplete shitty buggy version is on the disc. And sometimes they just don't even fix this stuff. Look at Monster Hunter Wilds. The game released like what, in February or something, and the game still runs like garbage on PC. Like, it's been a fucking long time. Fix it. Nowadays, games also take a lot of time to come out since they cost a lot, which hinders a lot of games. And then a lot of them just come out ass. I mean, look at Concord, for example. And also, it does not give us new IPs. Ubisoft, for example, don't want to create any more new IPs, but focus on their already established ones. But at the same time, they do nothing with it. What happened to Rayman, Splinter Cell, Tonic Trouble, and all that stuff? That's the reason a lot of the AAA space feels so similar, and why we always have the same formula and they don't have the guts to expand and do something new. That's why Death Stranding was a hit. Whether you like the game or not, it was unique and different, not something we can say for a lot of modern games now. These new games are not bad, but games like Horizon Zero Dawn literally feels like a Ubisoft game with more polish and with dinosaur robots. A game like God Hand, for example, would never come out in today's day and age. And this leads to my next point, the lack of games in specific genres. Remember the good old days where we had 100 games in each genre? Now you will struggle to find 5 games in a single genre that isn't open world or RPG. I'm glad stuff like hack and slash and hopefully stealth games make their return with Metal Gear Solid 3's remake and Ninja Gaiden 4. But in general, a lot of these genres have had their best titles during the last 3 eras. And also the lack of originality is a major issue. The lack of new ideas is not due to talent not being there. I mean, look at what the ex-Ubisoft dev team did. And they did all that with just 30 people. The fact is, a lot of these big companies do not want to risk it since games are a lot more expensive now. And to be fair, there are a few people who want the most realistic graphics ever, but they are a minority. I mean, a lot of the most successful games nowadays do not have the greatest graphics ever. Baldur's Gate 3 won Game of the Year and looked great. It looked amazing, but didn't have hyper realistic graphics. Expedition 33, for example, has been well received everywhere and did not have the greatest graphics. It looks visually stunning and visually amazing, but did not have the most hyper realistic graphics. So most people, most gamers, and most people in this demographic don't really care that much as long as the game looks visually good. It does not need to be hyper realistic to be an actual success. For example, Hitman: The Word of Assassination trilogy. After that embarrassment or whatever Hitman Absolution was, they listened to the fans and created a proper stealth game, stealth experience for the fans, and it was a success. Every single Hitman fan loved the Word of Assassination trilogy, and a lot of people who have never even known about Hitman before that have joined in as well. And that game is a AA game, okay? It does not look hyper realistic, although it visually looks great, and they were successes. And I'm sure most people wouldn't mind if their games look like that, especially if they can run well on modern systems, especially without the use of AI, which just makes everything a lot better. And in general, I think these companies, they're focusing too much on the graphical aspects and stuff like that, or even stuff like, for example, they're chasing trends that ended like 5 years ago and the game's releasing now. For example, like the example with Concord. Like, why would you try to enter the hero shooter market now when there are already so many big hero shooters that already have their established fan base, especially when you're an IP that literally no one has ever heard of? Okay, Marvel, the only reason Marvel Rivals can compete with Overwatch and all the other hero shooters is because of the name Marvel. Okay, no one is paying any money to play fucking Concord. Some games no one knows about any of the characters. No one cares about that fucking franchise. No one cares about anything, and you guys wasted a lot of money on that shit, and all the servers got pulled off now. I mean, who the fuck thought that was a good idea anyway? Generally, like, who? I talked before about like the good thing about the Hitman World of Assassination trilogy, but one bad thing about it is the fucking always online internet connection. There are a few games that still have this shit, and it's fucking annoying. I mean, look at The Crew. A lot of Ubisoft examples here. Support for The Crew's online servers have been completely gone. You might be thinking, okay, I can just play the single player because I like the game a lot. But no, Ubisoft said no, because the game is always online. Fuck you. You can't play the single player. The game is completely unplayable and locked. What the fuck is that? Okay, this is the reason why always online is fucking dog shit, and I do hope I'm still hopeful that IO gives an offline update or something. I know there are some mods that definitely fixes it, but I would like if the company were to do that. That's one of those things that's really fucking dog shit about modern gaming, especially when your game is a fucking single player game. If you're multiplayer, I get it. Fine, it's a multiplayer game, but why does a single player game need an always online functionality? Like, why the fuck do they care? If I'm not mistaken, Ghost Recon Breakpoint also has an always online feature, another Ubisoft fucking L. Why does that game have an always online feature? It's like 95% of the time a fucking single player game. I guess there's co-op, but you don't have to be always online for that. What the hell is wrong with you, Ubisoft? Another big issue I have, and this is also the last issue from the whole video, the overuse of remasters. Now, I actually like the concept of remasters, and a lot of them are actually decent, since they're basically just ports taken over and just remastered, maybe with some better controls, or change the controls so it works well with the stuff that didn't work before. Like, for example, Metal Gear Solid, the original games had the face buttons for the PlayStation 2 and the 3 were pressure sensitive. So Metal Gear Solid had that as part of their gameplay, but no modern controllers have that anymore. So in the remastered of the Master Collection, they just completely removed that. Those all stuff, they make sense, fine. I think it's great. More people can get into the franchises that I love. The concept itself, amazing. There are of course some really fucking bad remasters. Looking at you, Rockstar, you fucking twat. And then when those remasters are bad, we would normally tend to go back and play the original. But then Rockstar thought, oh, well, let's remove the original from the stores so that no one can buy them. And the only way to play these games is by playing our shitty remaster that fucking sucks ass balls. But at least the remaster does keep the original core of the game and stuff like that. You know, it's fine. But then there's the remakes. And remakes, most times in the modern definition, is start making the game from ground up and having, I don't know, a different story or something like that. They're mainly reimaginings nowadays, like what whenever Capcom releases a new Resident Evil, they're not remakes, they're mainly reimaginings. There are a few faithful remakes, like the Metal Gear Solid 3 remake is looking to be a faithful recreation, but most of them, especially from Capcom, have been reimaginings, changing up the story and stuff like that, which is not a bad thing. I mean, I enjoyed most of them. I loved the Resident Evil 4 remake. I like the Resident Evil 2 remake a lot as well. Fuck the Resident Evil 3 remake though. But what's genuinely baffling is they remake the game and they not let us play the original anywhere. Like, why aren't Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 playable on modern hardware? Resident Evil 1 had a remake, and that was, I think, the only remake that is pretty close to the original, even though it did have some changes, mostly for the better, of course, but the story and stuff was left unchanged for the most part. But I would still think players should be given the option to play the original one on modern hardware. What about Resident Evil 2 and 3, which are completely different in the remake, by the way? The stories are completely different. And, okay, the setting might be the same, but the stories are different. At least with Resident Evil 4, the remake and the original are both available on modern hardware, so you can play them at all times, whenever you want to. But for Resident Evil 2 and 3, they should be playable on modern hardware, because the games are different. And game preservation is important. And don't get me started on the whole Last of Us shit. Why did they remake a game that was already remastered on the PS4 that literally came out in 2014? Or you know what's even more insane? Why did they remaster The Last of Us 2, which literally came out in 2020? Why don't you, I don't know, use these resources to remaster the old God of War games at least, or at least make them playable on modern hardware? There are so many old games and stuff like that that are locked through time and they're not played, like the infamous games. Why don't you just port them over? Why don't you just remaster them or something and make them playable on modern hardware, so that we as a consumer can buy them instead of having to emulate them? If you don't have a PC good enough to emulate, you just can't even play the game, you're locked out. And then they start complaining about piracy. Looking at you, Nintendo, you fucking idiots. Like Gabe said, piracy is almost always a service problem and not a pricing problem. Do you guys agree or disagree? Put that down in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and like and subscribe and do all that good stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.